In 2010, Pixar was on a roll.
Pixar is now a perfect 11 for 11 when it comes to opening #1 at the box office.
It seemed like they just couldn't fail, and that's when they gambled on showing a side to the studio that you'd never expect, with something darker, more personal, and more twisted than anything they'd ever done before.
You're late!
They even hired the director behind Coraline and The Nightmare Before Christmas, who began crafting a dark fantasy world so bizarre, you'd never believe it came from the same place behind Toy Story.
Was a marriage made in hell?
And that's when they killed it, burying it so deep that most Disney and Pixar fans never even knew it existed. So why, with so much talent involved, did Disney and Pixar decide to axe what could have been their dark fantasy masterpiece? And why, after 15 years, could this lost film finally be ready to step back out of the shadows? These days, it feels like Pixar can only go one of two ways. Wildly hit,
Inside Out 2 smashing records already,
or massively miss.
Helio took in just $21 million in North America. That's the worst ever opening for a Pixar film.
But back in their golden age, they seemed unstoppable, redefining animated films with each release.
one of the best movies of the year, just so beautifully done. They always do it at Pixar.
Every summer, we could look forward to being charmed by a trash-compacting robot, heartbroken over an unfulfilled desire for adventure, and even the bittersweet handoff of childhood joy.
So long, partner.
But that golden streak of greatness came with a cost. Pixar's chief, John Lasseter, demanded constant improvement. His own style of perfectionism pushed directors to keep sanding down their films until they felt seamless. A system that worked for Toy Story and WALL-E, but left little room for risk.
Honestly, we put more pressure on ourselves to make good movies for our audience than anybody, any kind of pressure from the outside. The goal was to put the filmmakers, the artists, the animators, the story people, kind of creatively in charge, but to challenge them to make these films great. It takes 4 years to make an animated film, and you have every chance. This is what I say, you have every chance to do it right.
And it was that obsession, along with a scrappy little studio about to release their dark modern classic, that would push Pixar in an unexpected new direction, toward the master of one of animation's oldest forms.
Laika is the studio that we're talking about here. Little known, but it's responsible for the Oscar-nominated animated film Coraline. The movie cost about $65 million to make and grossed nearly twice that amount.
Travis, how competitive is the field at this point?
It's extremely competitive.
By 2009, greatness for animated films was once again being redefined. Sure, Pixar was still in the driver's seat when it came to 3D, and Disney had reasserted their dominance in hand-drawn. But for the first time in decades, the studios were at risk of being outshined in a corner of animation that they didn't own.
The country's most fantastic critics are raving. Fantastic Mr. Fox is beyond fantastic. It's the best animated film of the year.
Woo! Stop motion was once again in the critical spotlight, and neither Disney nor Pixar wanted to be left in the dust. And while Disney went about chasing down Tim Burton to dig up one of his old passion projects, Pixar had the perfect visionary to help lead them into a new era of innovation.
I make scary films for brave children of all ages.
And for stop-motion legend Henry Selick, the idea of blending his own dark fantasies with Pixar's technical resources seemed like the perfect union. Sure, he had had a mixed experience during his first stint with Disney, on cult favorites The Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach. But this time, things would be different. For one, he had a relationship with John Lasseter going all the way back to art school and their early days as Disney animators. Selick was also coming in as a hot commodity.
Very well deserved.
I believe that, heaviness or weight means more quality in awards. And often in women, too.
Really?
He had started work on Fantastic Mr. Fox before leaving to create the dark and twisted world of Coraline. Both films were critical darlings, and Coraline had even helped launch an entire animation studio into the mainstream. Snatching Selick from the competition was a clear win for Pixar, and being able to set him up nearby was a nice bonus.
The idea was, we'll set you up as an animation studio, your budgets have to be lower, and blah, blah, blah. It seemed like, well, great, my home base is that region. And there were several things that we pitched, but I'd had this story I'd worked on for a while, ultimately became the Shadow King.
Pixar had found their next darker chapter, but could the Shadow King really sit on the same shelf as their other classics? And for Henry Selick, it wasn't long before that lower budget and close proximity felt like less of an asset and more of a leash, constantly growing tighter with each new strange and fantastical idea.
It really came down to, we had a budget to work with, and it was plenty of money to do damage. Good damage.
To say Selick hit the ground running is an understatement. Within a year, he had established his new studio, built up a team of industry veterans including Pixar luminaries, and even gotten his first production greenlit. This project, initially known as Shademaker, was retitled to The Shadow King and slated for October 2013. A creepy Pixar Selick film hitting theaters just before Halloween? That definitely sounded like something to get excited about.
About a boy who he turns his disadvantage to an advantage in being able to create living shadows. His mangled looking messed up hands, with training by a living shadow girl, become elegant instruments.
The story follows Hap, a long-fingered boy who moves with his family into a creaky New York apartment. Inside, Hap and his brother Richard encounter eccentric neighbors, including a foul-tempered old woman who knows their darkest secrets. Soon, they're caught between strange forces from both the real and surreal worlds, compelling Hap to confront his own imperfections and accept himself. For Selick, it was a chance to expand the eerie world building he'd touched on in Coraline, with bigger sets, warped characters, and his darkest themes yet.
What? Richard's right. I'll never make shadows with these.
Not exactly the kind of story that was ever going to end up on lunchboxes or toy aisles. And it was a far cry from the usual family-friendly worlds of Pixar. But at the time, none of that mattered, because John Lasseter absolutely loved what Selick and his team had created, and that would turn out to be the worst thing that could have happened to the Shadow King.
And what I didn't realize was, John, when he says he loves something, that he's implying, but I'd love it more if I was involved.
By 2011, Selick's team had models built and cameras rolling. And this is exactly when Lasseter and the Pixar Brain Trust stepped in and decided to get their hands dirty.
He couldn't help himself. He just changed things over and over and over. His approach is, I want to see every permutation, every possibility that there could be.
Their endless notes, demanding every possible change, worked fine for 3D animation, but for stop motion, each second is 24 frames of a physically manipulated movement. At best, this style of feedback felt unsustainable. At worst, it felt disastrous. Still, Selick and his team did everything they could to implement Pixar's feedback, while keeping the Shadow King true to their original vision. At one point, the brothers were rewritten as orphans, with Hap's powers warped into weapons for a shadow war with a monster threatening New York City. But even after a full year of back and forth between Selick and Pixar, they still just couldn't balance Selick's dark vision, Pixar's innovation, and Disney's marketing into a clear path forward.
I mean, they started giving me notes, like after a year of the way it had been a year before when it was my movie. And it kind of just got to this point where, they just, it's too weird, the costs were getting too high.
In the summer of 2012, almost a full year after it had been greenlit, Disney abruptly announced that Pixar would no longer be moving forward on The Shadow King, citing production delays and creative challenges. The studio's grand experiment with stop motion was officially over, never to return.
When it was shut down, it was like both the saddest day and the happiest day of my life. I'd never been beat up so badly. And this is after, well after Nightmare, but just after Coraline. To be beat up this bad by people who know better, it was torture.
Disney let Selick shop the project elsewhere. Even Laika, the studio behind Coraline, considered it. But with Paranorman having just been released, they passed, leaving Selick's vision incomplete and fading even further from reality. And while it seems like this is where the story of the Shadow King would end, it turns out it may still have plenty of life left. Because a decade later, Henry Selick announced that a path towards possible resurrection has been illuminated.
Basically, John Lasseter couldn't help himself. He kept trying to Disneyfy it till the budget went through the roof. It got shut down. And I was kind of down. I wasn't sure I was going to make another movie again.
After the cancellation of The Shadow King, Selick took time to reflect on his experience and contemplate his future. The next time we'd see him was 10 years later, with his 2022 collaboration with Key & Peele, Wendell and Wild.
Everyone's got demons. My demons have names.
Pixar and Disney, meanwhile, declared that they'd be doubling down on safe sequels, a trend that continues to this day.
Toy Story 5. The sequel to the Academy Award-winning film Coco is in the works from Pixar.
Did he just say incredible?
And over the years, concept art and test footage from The Shadow King surfaced online, shared by the artists who'd worked so hard to bring it all to life. But just when it seemed dead forever, Henry Selick dropped a bombshell. While promoting Wendell and Wild, he revealed,
I got the rights back from Disney, and maybe if the new film is considered a success, maybe I'll revive The Shadow King.
It won't be the same film, but it'll be based on my original story. It'll be a better film than what was happening. It won't be a film by committee.
And while the fate of The Shadow King ultimately remains unclear, it's hard not to wonder. If Pixar had followed through and fully committed to Selick's unique world, would the studio we have today look completely different? Maybe Pixar's golden age could have lasted longer if they'd only dared to embrace the shadows instead of letting Selick's vision fade into them.
We can cut everything away and get it down to pure invention. And yes, I mean, if I make more films, it's because of that power of animation to completely invent a space, a world, characters, change the laws of physics. Animation is my first and my most powerful love because of its power to completely create from nothing.
Another dark visionary that clashed with Disney? Tim Burton. Check out my video on the bizarre highs and crushing lows of his 3-decade relationship with the House of Mouse.